Can you hear me, John? Oh,
yes.
there we
Hello,
go.
everybody.
Hello, morning.
I thought we might get Antonia on board to just get us started. So over to you, Antonia.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the few technology-related dramas. So firstly, good morning. Welcome, everyone. I just really wanted to take the opportunity just to really start the session before John kicks off, just with a couple of messages from the REIQ. So really the very first thing I want to say is really just to remind everyone that the REIQ is here to support you during this incredibly difficult time. I'll be honest with you and say it's a unique experience for all of us. But I really just wanted to remind everyone that as your membership body, as your peak body, we are here to support you. You may have already seen that the REIQ has released a toolkit. It's very practical, it's written in plain English, it's got some commonly asked questions that we've been receiving through agency advice and property management support service. So we have tried to focus on the most commonly asked questions. It's not an exhaustive list of Q&As, otherwise it would have been an enormous resource, and new questions are emerging daily. So I want to assure you that that's only part one. We will continue to develop resources for you to use. The toolkit does have some template documentation that you can use. And look, we're happy to make that toolkit available to everyone. Obviously, normally we restrict our services to members only, but given the current environment we're operating in, if anyone is on this webinar at the moment who hasn't received it, reach out to us. We are happy to share it with you. You can simply email us at ask@reiq.com.au and we will send you a copy of that toolkit. In that toolkit, there are also links to lots of other resources. So I do encourage you to read it. And then if you have any questions, reach out to us. For the members online, I want to remind you that the REIQ offers the property management support service and agency advice service, and for accredited agencies, also the legal advice service with Cardinal lawyers. So that is all free to use. So a reminder that that's available for you. So just quickly, to get to PMSS support, you can email pmsupport@reiq.com.au, or agency advice is ask@reiq.com.au, or if you'd rather just call, if that's easier, you can get in touch with both of those services via the phone number 1300 697 347. Also, given that today will be primarily online, I expect we have business owners as well as maybe some support crew and management. Just wanted to let you know that minutes ago, an announcement came out from the big four banks in relation to business loans. So this will be music to the ears of many small business owners, SMEs out there. So there is a deferral of 6 months on loan repayments, which I think will come as a welcome relief to so many of us. So check that out. Make sure you register. My understanding is they're keeping the process pretty straightforward and simple. So any of you that do have business loans with the big four, make sure you reach out to them to register for that. I just quickly wanted to also let you know what we're doing behind the scenes. I can assure you that all week we've been talking with lots of different stakeholders and with government about what needs to happen in terms of further support and to ensure that the property market remains stable. That's not only relevant for all of you because of what you do for a living, but I'm sure you'll agree that the real estate market, the property market, is the backbone of our economy in Queensland. So it's critically important that people can continue to buy real estate, to pay their mortgages, and that renters can continue to pay their rent. So just to let you know, we're working with a team of people, including the Department of Housing. The kinds of things we're asking for is a program to be set up specifically to help renters to be able to continue paying rent You may have seen that the Victorian government has come out with a $6 million package for that. We think that's critically important because our expectation is that we will see tenants probably losing their jobs, and as a result, they'll be unable to make their rent payments, which of course then, as you would expect, will have a big impact on owners as well as on your respective businesses. So that's something that we are working behind the scenes with government on. Obviously, we're also hopeful that we can encourage the banks, in addition to the announcement they've come out with today. We'd love to see the banks coming out with some sort of a freeze or a deferral of payments on residential mortgages as well. I think that's going to be also really, really important to keep the market to keep people housed and also to keep the market firing along. So there's a lot happening behind the scenes. We're going to a meeting on Monday with a range of different organisations to talk about other things that need to happen. This will require all three levels of government to work together. It's not just our state government that needs to do the heavy lifting. It needs to be at all levels. We're hopeful that the local government will also come to the party and we'll see some relief in terms of some of those rates and other property related taxes. So we haven't put anything out specifically about it yet, simply because we don't want to commit and promise to something that we don't know is happening for a fact. And so I would encourage you to stay tuned, keep watching what the REIQ is putting out. And just finally, before I hand over to John, can I just encourage everyone who's participating in this webinar to really just be careful about where you're obtaining your information from, and also maybe just be careful about what you are saying. We're just concerned about the number of people who at the moment are acting like armchair experts, and I just think in times like these, I mean, we are in highly unique circumstances, completely uncharted territory. We just need to make sure that we are leaving it to the right people to comment, and that the sources of truth are reliable. So please think about that when you're putting things up on Facebook, when you're putting things up on social media. Try and be sensitive. You know, there are some comments going around that I don't think are very helpful. So if we can all be mindful of that and sensitive, I think that's really important. So look, you know, let's keep communicating. I think we'll all need to work as a team to get through this, but I want to assure you that the REIQ is, we're in there, we're working on it. You can rely on us to lead you through this, and look, we will get through it. I don't want to underestimate the significance of what we're going through. It is incredibly serious, but we will ultimately make our way through it. And what I'm saying to everyone is we need to take each day as it comes, day by day. So look, on that note, I will hand over to John. I do want to just say a massive thank you to John and to Business Depot. John is volunteering his time for us today. It's not the first time John's done this for us, for the REIQ and for the real estate profession in Queensland. Many of you already know John really well. He's an accountant by background, but he's so much more than that. He understands real estate so incredibly well, and he's so insightful, and we're really grateful. Today is really an important day for in terms of John being able to give you some advice and address some of those really important questions and concerns that I'm sure all business owners have at the moment. So I wanted to say thanks so much to John. We're really grateful to you and for your offer to help us with this webinar.
My pleasure, my absolute pleasure. Antonio, before you go,
yeah.
Do you mind if I just ask, what's the word on the street? Because when you hear about COVID or coronavirus and the impact it's had on the economy, obviously there's that first line of impact to tourism and bus operators and coffee shops and hospitality and those types of things. What are you hearing in the real estate industry, the principals sort of saying? Are they noticing it yet?
Yeah, well, look, at the moment, really the main concerns seem to be the most immediate impact it's having is in that rental market. Yeah. We're getting smashed with property managers and real estate principals saying, you know, we can't get into the property, tenants don't want to let us in, there's concerns about letting contractors in. The key concern is what will happen when renters are unable to make their rent payments. So I think initially that's where we're seeing the biggest impact. I don't think we're seeing a massive impact yet in the sales market. Having said that, I've heard of at least one contract where the purchaser backed out simply on the basis that they got cold feet because of COVID. And I think realistically, that's something that we're likely to see a little bit more of, because we know that confidence is key when it comes to buying real estate. So I think it's likely to have an impact on the sales market, probably starting with investors. We might see investors holding off during this time because of those issues relating to renters losing job. There might be some concerns about, is now the right time? But having said that, look, I don't want to sort of be unnecessarily optimistic, but what I will say is the property market always proves itself to be incredibly resilient, as you know, John, particularly here in Queensland, where we go through natural disasters on a fairly regular basis. History has shown that the property market remains pretty resilient and bounces back quickly. So that's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, as a number of people are commenting, given what the share market is doing, I do think there will be people who are saying, right, let's get back to property. It's a good tangible asset. It's not nearly as you know, up and down, if you like, as the share market is. So look, really early days. What I will say really quickly, we're just about to release our quarterly data, which is our data for the October to December 2019 period, and I can tell you that quarterly data is extraordinary. The market performed so well. We really saw it bounce back after a fairly soft 12 months. So there's no doubt in my mind that we are absolutely on our way up. It's just a question of how much of an impact now COVID-19 will have on that moving forward.
Yeah, well, a key word's uncertainty, isn't it? And in uncertain times, what do people tend to do? They tend to do nothing. And so, you know, I expect to see, we don't know how long this is going to last.
That's
and
right.
So what I expect to see is people just press the pause button.
Exactly.
And so one of the big things I want to talk about in the webinar today is if your landlords, if your tenants, if your buyers and your sellers are pressing pause, what does that mean for your business and what can you do in your business? Because it is uncertain times. And so we need to make sure your business is as resilient as it can possibly be.
Absolutely, spot on.
Antonia, thank you so much for your time and thank you for your kind words, of course, as well. But I really appreciate your insights and what's going on in the background. I absolutely commend the REIQ for their disaster work that they've done in a couple of disasters now, but this is a different type of one again. So great work on that. There was a question in the Q&A, if you could just repeat, how can they get their hands on that toolkit?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So the email, so if you email us, we'll send you a copy, and that is at ask@reiq.com.au.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Antonia.
Thank you, John.
Cheers. Okay, everybody, well, let's get on and get into some of the detail now. And I'm just going to share some notes and some presentation that I'd like to share with you all as I talk through some of these things. You know, we've entitled it Navigating These Times, and really the key word we really should insert in there is the uncertain times. I really want to focus in on the business, and I really want to focus in on the back end of the business, because it's the back end that'll give you the resilience. Now, whether you're feeling it yet or not, what it's not like is it's not like a flood or a cyclone or something like that. This is an economic crisis as much as it is a health crisis. And so because of that, we haven't dealt with anything like this before. And the big thing is, what are we going to do when people lose jobs? What are we going to do when businesses go broke? What are we going to do with these people that are paying their rents or owning their properties? Or what are we going to do when these people are buying properties or selling properties and they just stop? Sorry, just checking the questions there as they come through. Please feel free to add any questions to the Q&A as we go. I'll make sure at the end that if I don't cover them off on the way through, we cover them off at the end. But this is getting real. Now, again, I don't want to be doomsday. I want to be optimistic. And this is a very resilient industry, especially the property management sort of side of things, and especially the people with what they deal with. But this is getting real, and it's getting real fast. So we need to be ready. So let's get into some of my tips. We are going to be affected. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't take the ostrich approach. We need to protect you and your family and your businesses and all those stakeholders that are connected to your businesses. So it makes sense for us to have a strong, resilient business for us to be working in. So whatever lies ahead, we don't know. So let's just get ready for it as best as we can. So my first tip is around everything the first thing I say to anybody that comes to me and they're in a little bit of financial strife is I talk about calculating your break-even point. Now, your break-even point is that point where you've got enough income coming in to meet your commitments, to meet your fixed costs every month. Now, there's two different types of break-even points we often talk about in business. There's the traditional one, which is your profit break-even, but there's also a cash break-even point. Now, your profit break-even is when you pay your wages, pay your rents, and pay those sorts of costs. Your cash break-even also takes into account your other cash commitments. So typically that'll include things like your drawings, that'll include your school fees, but it'll also include things like your loan repayments that don't necessarily go on your profit and loss. So incorporate those within your calculation so you know how much you have to earn. Now, as Antonia shared before, the big banks have come out this morning saying that they're basically giving a 6-month moratorium on repayments. Now, that is great because when I talk to businesses about the costs that they're most worried about, usually it's staff, it's rent, and it's loan repayments. And so if we can take one of those off the table at least, then we give our businesses a chance. So what can we do about our break-even point? Well, once you know your break-even point, we can make your business stronger by reducing that break-even point if we can. And the obvious way to do that is to reduce your fixed costs. Reduce those costs that you incur every day, every month, irrespective of what you're up to. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. Maybe it's time to revert to some higher margin work. Now, that could be selling principal. Principal's getting out there and doing some sales again. Not something that might be part of your long-term strategy, but could be an option to get us through these times. Growing your rent roll is actually an option to reduce your break-even point. You know, a lot of people actually go and buy a rent roll during these times. If they've got the equity, they can go buy that rent roll, gives them that consistent income, which reduces their break-even point, and therefore means they are more resilient until we get through the other side of this. Revert to interest only on your loans. We've already heard the banks are going to give a complete moratorium by the sounds of things, but check out what your bank will do. And obviously talk to your banks as well. You know, I've got here renegotiate loan repayments, but that's obviously old news now with the bank's announcements. Tax officers also come out with some great administrative concessions. They will allow us pretty much carte blanche to defer our tax payments. I think it's out to about August off the top of my head, but I've got the detail of that in our blog. That includes PAYG installments, that includes BASs, and income tax commitments by the sounds of things. So don't be, make sure you keep enough cash in the kitty for what lies ahead before just meeting these normal sort of commitments that you have, but obviously keeping track of how much you are going to owe. And the other thing is focus on your staff mix. So if you're in your sales team in particular, I always remind people to focus on the mix of what level of performer you have in there, because you can make more money on some people than on others. So as I said, your break-even point is where your fixed costs and your variable costs meet your income. And so we need to know what that is. And to make your business more resilient, we simply want to move that line down so that we're reducing your break-even point and therefore earlier in the month starting to make money. My second tip is review your costs. So obviously this is a deep dive on my bullet point before. And unfortunately, you're going to need to cut some costs if you can. I know I'm not ever going to be the type of accountant or business advisor that stands here and goes cut costs, cut costs, cut costs. But if you thought or if you think you've got a remote excess in your costs, you probably need to cut it. And now what I encourage here is just don't take the ostrich approach. Don't think that this will all blow over in a couple of weeks. If you've got a cost to cut it now, just like Qantas did. They know they've got a big runway, pardon the pun, until they start to be able to operating again. They had no choice but to reduce their costs. But it's not all about cutting wages or cutting staff. Of course, casual wages is an easy one to cut. But of course, if it's a casual wage that you want to continue to use, or it's somebody that you've had a long-term relationship with, you might not want to do that. But maybe everyone can give a little bit, and everyone is going to have some cost here. maybe your employees can share some of the burden here as well. And so what I'm seeing a lot of people doing is with permanent staff, instead of cutting them, they're going to a 50-50 arrangement or a 4-day-a-week arrangement. Different things like that where we're sharing the load, sharing the burden. And why we would do that is so that they can stay in a job. They've got the security of a job to come back to, but we just have to probably reduce some of our commitments depending on how your business fares and where your break-even point is. Obviously, we're going to focus on non-performing salespeople. I don't like putting that up there, but if we've got non-performing salespeople with the current awards, you now have more of a commitment to costs for them. Either get them performing or you've probably got to get them out, unfortunately. Review your subscriptions, especially those subscriptions you're not using or not getting value out of. We're constantly paying these amounts every month. So what are those costs and are you getting value out of them? If not, you might need to be aggressive. If someone's not really using that special subscription that you have, then unfortunately you've probably got to cut it. And don't underestimate what $500 a month here and there can add up to. Again, something I always harp on about is not funding advertising for others. Now that's going to be tricky in this market because you've got vendors who absolutely want you to fund the advertising for them. But I'm saying to you, don't fund those advertising. Look at some of those payment arrangement systems that are out there that will allow the vendor to assume the responsibility and spread the cost over through those providers rather than you using your bank balance to lend to these guys. Some people will cut their growth costs like BDMs, or there might be sponsorships or something or other. Maybe it's not a time for growth, maybe it's a time for strength. So review those costs which you might consider growth costs and think about whether you need to cut some of those as well. Obviously rent is one of the other big ones. This is not an easy one to do. Obviously getting out a lease or looking at subtenant arrangements or some sort of collaboration with others in your area could be one way to try and reduce some of those costs as well. My third thing, focus on your incremental profits. So once you know your break-even point, you effectively know your profit formula. You know how you make your money. When you know how you make your money, let's focus on how we get one more dollar to that bottom line. Now, when I talk about incremental profits, I always make sure we're talking about it on a divisional basis. So when I talk about profits in a real estate business, I need to know where your profits in sales, property management, in principals, so that's selling, that's a principal selling or principal costs, admin, shared services, or then if you've got any other specialist division. So usually how I think about that is I will go to a divisional P&L. So as you can see here, I've got columns for my different divisions. And then you can see down the bottom, I've got my net shared services down here. And so if you think about your profit like that, we can start to think about, okay, well, how do we increase the income on those top lines? What the main variable expense we have is in the sales business. And we obviously want to make that as lean as we can. And then we've got our fixed costs. And they're really the boxes you're going to focus on in your P&L. And if we do all that, it's going to allow us to increase our operating profit or reduce our operating losses if that's where we get, unfortunately. Of course, you're also going to look at that on a percentage sort of basis as well, so you can see how you are tracking. My fourth tip, be prepared for the emotional stress. Now, one of the things that I love doing is making sure we don't just look at the numbers of a business. Yes, I'm an accountant, but I run businesses, I advise businesses all day, every day of different shapes and sizes. And one of the biggest things is actually the human element of business. Now, different people react to different situations and different people will react to this crisis. I see drama, I see panic, I see overreaction. But what we have to do is we have to make sure we're aware of it, we're aware of how we're reacting ourselves, and think about that, how that overlays within our business. Some of these people might have their own financial stresses. Maybe their spouse has lost their job, or their grandparents are stuck in an aged care facility that they can't visit anymore, or they've got financial pressures. We have to think about what that emotional stress is as part of this. We've got different personality types, as I said before, that react differently. And if ever there was a time to do personality profiling on your team, now is a great time to do it, because everyone reacts to unknown circumstances, to uncertainty, to change differently. And one of the best things you could do as a leader in your business is actually understand your people. We use the Myers-Briggs personality profiling with our team, but there's also DISC. And there's also some other applications, like I'm aware of one put out by a company called Adaptive Minds, which is all around your tolerance for ambiguity, which is perfect for this situation at the moment. Understand your people so that when you come in and you give instructions or share the vision or share the story, you can take that into account in how you deliver that to them. And then, of course, eliminate some of that stress by making sure you've got a coronavirus policy or you're updating people on what's going on. It's really important for you to show your team that you've got this under control as much as you can, and you update it. You don't have to have every answer, but just update it as more information comes to light. Now, we've done that internally here at Business Depot. As you can see, we still operate in our office here. We haven't gone to remote working yet. But we've limited meetings, we've limited travel, and we'll probably start having a greater portion of our workforce work from home next week and onwards. But it's important that we've given them a plan, we've told them what we're doing and why we're doing it. But we've made a concerted effort to not go outside what the government recommends. And the reason we've done that is then we haven't made the decision, they've made the decision. So we're not overreacting in advance and sending everybody home, but what we are doing is we're taking into account everything that they share with us, and making sure we're minimising any potential risk to us, to our team, and to society generally. Once you get to your incremental profit side of things, I don't know why that slide's jumped in there, to be honest, but the Macca's formula is the way I think about what else can we have in our business. Do you want fries with that? And when you're talking about your incremental profit, maybe you want fries with something to just get that little bit more profit on the bottom line. Tied into emotional stress and tied into performance is really around how you monitor your team and their performance. Now, I've shared this at the many REIQ events I've spoken at before, but when we're honing in on those people and how they're performing, I like this concept of raising the bar of average. Get your salespeople in this situation, plot them on a whiteboard. How many sales are they doing per month? Whether it's that metric or some other metric, what are those things below average, those performers that are below average? What can we do to help them to improve their performance? Bring that into that personal discussion with those individuals. Because of course, So then when we get to my fifth tip, review your supplier arrangements. So, everybody has a part to play in getting through this crisis. We've seen the banks give concessions. We've seen a number of corporates say they'll still pay some casual employees. The government, the ATO, are giving some different concessions. And I think most suppliers are going to expect some call at some point in time for some type of concession or some type of leeway within their business. Now, if you think about your suppliers, think about who they should be. Maybe you need to get a bit more payment terms on your advertising accounts, or maybe you need to talk to your landlord and see if you can negotiate an extension or some deferrals or something or other. I think it's important that if you don't ask, you don't get. But I would say be upfront with your creditors, asking them to defer the payment of upfront costs into the future. Recover your VPA upfront if you can. And I actually think it's critical to your success. And as I said, just think about all your suppliers and have a good look at those. Number 6, invest in technology. One of the things that I think is going to be really interesting about this crisis is that I think it's going to change the way we work forever. We're going to find online meetings, webinars, and different things like that are going to be adopted so much quicker. Online chat systems. I was using an online whiteboard yesterday. How we use our technology and invest in that technology is going to make us more resilient and going to make us enable us to make sure we deliver on the services we provide and continue to do so through such crisis. So change how we work. We have to build in flexible working, remote working. Someone said to me they went to Officeworks the other day and they pretty much sold out of laptops and chairs and things because everyone's setting up their home offices. Adoption is much more successful because we need the change at this point in time. But, talk to others who have implemented it as well. Don't just feel like you have to muddle your way through it. There's so many online community forums or REIQ that can make recommendations on the technology that you use and ask for what their experiences are. Number 7, if you feel like you are already struggling, maybe it's time for a merger with somebody else, or maybe it is time for an exit. And really who I'm thinking about when I talk about some of this is really around, I remember many principals went through the GFC and came out of it and said, I can't do that again. If you're one of those people and you're thinking, I don't know if I've got the energy to get through another crisis, I would get on the front foot and start the discussion. There's no harm in starting the discussion. And maybe the idea is you have a local competitor that's a friendly competitor. Maybe you go down the road and you say, should we start operating together, or can we do something together? Or maybe it is just a straight buy. Because really what we want out of these merger sort of situations is that if you and I get together, we get a value that is more than the sum of just the two of us. I actually think during these times, you know, when I talked about break-even points, I actually think you'll get some people who want to buy a rent roll, and you'll also get some people who want to get out of the rent roll. So I don't think these times necessarily make it a bad time to buy or to sell. One of the bigger things will be how the banks react and whether they're even interested in new finance arrangements, and quite possibly it's only going to be available to those businesses that have the equity or the capital to do it already. Number 8, back to the link to my emotional stress comment, make sure we keep the human focus. And when I talk about the human focus in business, you know, I think you've got to make sure you audit how you're working with the people, you review how you work with the people, then go and set up how you're going to work with the people, test it, and then actually do it. Now, this might be as simple as your work at home policy, or do people even have a laptop and an NBN connection to do the work from home? Don't underestimate the human impact on that, because at the end of the day, the most successful businesses I see have strong leaders and a strong culture. Because ultimately they're going back to this. They're continually putting everyone on the bus, getting them facing the front, giving them somewhere to drive to, someone at the wheel, and no one grabbing a pole on the way past to slow them down. And this is your time to shine as a leader. So you need to get at that steering wheel, and you need to make sure you're showing them where you're going, making sure they understand why you're making the decisions you're making, and giving them that path. So leadership and the strength of your culture will shine during these times. Number 9, get some accountability, you know, with your team around performance and stuff. I actually encourage people to be transparent. Be transparent with, this is going to be tough, guys. We can do this, but it's going to be tough. And be transparent with some of your positions as well, because the most important part of these accountability discussions is actually the discussion. You can do all sorts of KPIs and reports, etc. on accountability. But if you can actually just sit down and have a meaningful discussion around performance, and that you need them to perform during these times, and that you'll help them and they'll help you, then that is the most important part of the accountability piece. We need to know where people are at. We need to make decisions quickly during these times. So we need to know where we are at now, and that's at all levels, business level, divisional level, and individual level as well. Because ultimately we don't want these guys. We don't want guys sleeping on the couch, drinking our beer as they are in this picture here. Now, again, I harp on about this at all the REIQ sessions that I go to. That's all we need to think about from an accountability perspective. You can't afford during tough times to have people sleeping on your couch. And then my final tip is a financial tip. I am an accountant at the end of the day, but maybe you will need to tip some money in. So maybe it is time to think about, do you have any personal cash you can tip in the business to get through this blip? Can you free up some cash around the place? Do you need to talk to the banks or the brokers to find some cash and truly get on the front foot and enable you to be ready for what lies ahead? Now, I've got a couple of questions here, which I might just jump to. There's a question here from Nick. Do you think sellers will start using virtual tours to start selling their homes? And do you think buyers will buy from a virtual tour? I actually think virtual tours are going to be one of the massive beneficiaries out of a crisis like this. I absolutely think this might be the catalyst to get people comfortable with that. Now, I say that with one precursor, and that is, you know, the quality of the virtual tour, and do they feel they can get that human, real experience walking through those? I think it's a great opportunity. I think they could both potentially be successful at this point in time. The concern would be about the human factor and whether we will be able to get that human connection to a property from a sales perspective. There's also a question there from Steve. Can we obtain a copy of this recording? Absolutely. I'll make sure the REIQ makes that available. I dare say you'll find that we will just share this on social media and you'll be able to download on that on there, because I know REIQ and ourselves are more than happy to share anything we can do to help in this situation. We've got some more questions here from Nathan. People are wanting to cancel inspections. I think that's the reality of what we're going to deal with. There's this energy out there where people are just avoiding all contact. So that's where I think we probably are not going to have much choice, but I think the REIQ will have some advice on that in their toolkit. Emma has got a question. Could I please get one too to share with my boss? Yep, I think that's about the presentation. We've got a question from Janet. Do we think that open homes should be cancelled and viewings by appointment only? As at an open home, the agent cannot be with each buyer all of the time and buyers could be touching things. I will revert that one to the REIQ, not my area of expertise, unfortunately, but I'll make sure that one goes across to the REIQ. And I've got a great comment on here as well by our esteemed leader, Peter Brewer. Happy to chat to people who need information on the virtual tours as well. So guys, I think any of you who saw me speak at the last REIQ zone lunches will know that I like this little video. And as much as we've got this time of uncertainty, I think we need to keep this in mind as well. I always talk about the squirrels in business. There are so many things that come into our office and they're hanging from the rafters or they're distracting us from what we need to do. At this point in time, we need focus and we need to not overreact. Just like Antonia said right at the beginning, yes, we need to be optimistic, but let's not bury our head in the sand like an ostrich either. Let's make sure that we're watching out for those squirrels and we're keeping focus on the game, keeping focus on what it is that we're trying to actually achieve in this business. I'll also conclude this with my quote that I conclude most presentations: sales are vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality, and never will there be a surer time to prove that. You know, we can see people on social media boasting about the sales they've done in the last week, you know, what coronavirus, good on them, congratulations. But the reality is, we don't know what is around the corner. And so if we've got some cash in the reserves, we've got some equity in the reserve, then we'll be in a good position to weather this storm, because it's only a storm. It's not going to last forever, but there will be massive impact on unemployment and earnings of different people. Guys, I thought I'd just also really quickly touch on some of the government stimulus that has already been announced. There's going to be another wave of stimulus, we're told. Anyone who's paying payroll tax, the Queensland government's announced that will be deferred until August. They're not waiving it though. I'm hoping they'll actually beef that up a bit to actually waive payroll tax for 3 months. The New South Wales government has waived it, but Queensland hasn't. They've just deferred it. So a lot of people are asking me, well, should I pay it or should I not? I'm not going to get any interest, but I'm concerned I'm going to forget about it. So a lot of people are lodging it to keep track of their liability, but just not going to pay it. The Queensland government also do loans, interest-free loans of $250,000. I don't think that's going to be great for the real estate industry, to be completely honest. I think it's probably more targeted at tour operators and some of the more directly connected. We've then got the federal government support, which I've got the links here that you can go in and have a look. The big one, which will be good for you guys, is the $25,000 cash injection for businesses. Now, interestingly, how this will work is that this will work by automatically applying a credit on your business activity statement or your installment activity statement. So when you prepare your March BAS, let's say it's got on there $20,000 worth of PAYG withholding, and that is the tax you take out of people's wage. What they're going to do is they're going to credit that for 50% of the value. So if you owe them $20,000, they'll credit you 10 and you only have to pay 10. And that'll keep happening through all your activity statements up till your June activity statement to a maximum of $25,000 benefit. So that's a $25,000 reduction of your costs. We don't know what else we're going to get. There's some other incentives around depreciation and investments, but to be completely honest, I wouldn't get too excited about that. There's the $750 cash that's going out to anyone on Centrelink or age pensions or anything like that as well. But the real one to get excited about at the moment is the $25,000, which will make some difference. I don't think it'll solve everyone's problem, but it will make some difference. I'm just checking here if there's any more questions. If anyone does have any more questions, please add them to the chat or to the Q&A. What do I see the opportunity on the other side? Yeah, from a business strategy perspective, I think there's a real opportunity for a shift within the industry. Like I said before, with the adoption of technology, this could be a real opportunity to have a more efficient business, a more resilient business, just generally. And I think this is the type of event that actually sort of turbocharges that or makes that happen. I think there is some concern in that because, you know, we've talked about who's going to be the disruptor at some point in time. There's some concern that some of these people that have just been sitting on the sideline, does this give them some traction when we come out of this blip or this uncertain sort of period? I don't think we should get too anxious about that. I think the world will look a bit different, but I think we should continue to keep an eye out for those opportunities that are there. I've got another question here. My 35 plus years in the industry, buyers will spend 1 hour looking at a 20K car, but fall in love with a property worth 500K within 5 minutes. I truly think buyers need to touch and feel a property rather than see it on a computer screen. And I'm sure there's an absolute truth in that, and I don't deny that. I always remember my wife walking in and go, "Oh wow, look at those ceilings! I'm going to buy this place." I'm not suggesting all sales would be sold through virtual tours, but I'm saying it's an opportunity for virtual tours to get much more traction, online auctions, and those types of things. Kylie, thank you, Kylie. Thank you for your nice words. Couple more in the Q&A. Sorry, guys. Can you see the government pausing rent payments? Yeah, this was something done. I think it was in Melbourne. There's been, or maybe that question is about actually government organisations pausing their rent payments. Not sure. But if I look at it on both fronts, I think commercial property will have some impacts. I also think when we get to the residential property and the government's helping people with their rent payments, I think Victoria has come out with some announcements around helping people pay their rent. Got another question here. This will affect rent roll income. I think it will, because you're going to have people who can't pay their rents when we've got unemployed. It's also an opportunity to get stronger. Typically in tough times, those with a strong rent roll get stronger, and rent rolls typically are the biggest sort of part of that. And so it could be a really good opportunity to really strengthen up your rent roll, and it might be the bit that sort of really gets you through this. I actually probably have no doubt about that. Look, guys, I've gone over time, but hopefully that's given you some of our thoughts from a broader business perspective around what to do in your real estate business during these times. Again, the keywords here are uncertainty. And when we just don't know, I think we need to prepare for this to go for some time, or for the impact and flow-on effect of this to be for some time. Not overreact, but I do think we need to prepare and make our business as resilient as we possibly can. We'll make sure a recording is made available, if not on social media. I'm sure the REIQ will circulate it as well. If you don't get a hold of it for some reason, please shoot me an email direct, and I will make sure you get a copy of it as well. I'll just put up my email address for anybody who wants to, sorry, I went to the wrong slide there. For anybody who does want to get a copy of this, and you can just contact me direct, either by mobile or by email. I'll get a copy to you. Don't have it on there. So my email address is j.knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, @businessdepot.com.au, or otherwise feel free to give me a call in the office, 07 3193 3000. Happy to help, happy in any way to guide you on this. We all need to stick together. Everyone's got something to give in this situation. So please, I'm happy to support the industry to sort of get through this. So if I can do that, I'd be more than happy to. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you've got some value out of that. Check out also our website. Under the blogs tab, you'll see a whole number of blogs on this issue. There's a real estate specific one. There's a Queensland government one, federal government one, and keep an eye out or subscribe, and we will update those as we get new announcements from the government. Thank you very much. And thanks for joining us. Cheers, guys.